What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 336. I am one of your Limited Resources. My name is Marshall, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, where they're experiencing an internet shortage. It's Luis Scott-Vargas, LSV. Is it going to work?
I don't know if it's a citywide or perhaps this house-wide internet shortage, but we'll find out.
It could be local to your residence. We'll see as we go. Luis has been having a couple of issues with his internet, but
I used up all the internet with my quad Q stream yesterday.
Yeah, you didn't leave any for even yourself the next day. All right, so we're going to do a little check-in here on Shadows over Innistrad. We've done a few interview and level up type shows over the last few, and we thought this would be a good time to touch base again with Shadows and figure out where we're at on the format, some of the cards, re-review some of those, take a look at some of the archetypes, and just some of the big picture stuff as well. So that's going to be the main discussion topic here. We're also going to do a Crack-A-Draft. We know how much you love those, where we're going to basically do picks 1 through 4 of a draft, and we'll get to that in just a minute. I'll explain how it works. Before we get into everything, though, our sponsor, ChannelFireball.com, is a proud sponsor of Limited Resources, and why not? You can go there and find everything that you need Magic related. You can find singles, sealed product. You can find supplies. You can get, sleeves and playmats and that kind of stuff. And you can even sell your cards back if you want. I know a lot of people who are primarily limited players, and they'll draft with their friends or get into some drafts here and there, and you kind of accumulate some amount of cards. But if you're not planning on, specifically playing standard with a lot of the current format cards, they can kind of pile up on you. And one thing you can do is go to Channel Fireball and sell them back. And a really neat thing is you can even get a nice bonus if you want to trade them in for store credit, which of course means you can turn them into more booster packs, hence more drafts, the circle of life. You can find that, and of course, a host of awesome free content by some of the best players in the world every single day at Channel Fireball. This show is also brought to you by you. You can support the show directly via the Patreon, and it has been awesome. We've really, we crossed that 1,000 patron mark a couple of weeks ago. I started giving a few things away to say thank you to our patrons, and it's just kept going since then. So I'm going to keep giving stuff away because I just think it's awesome that you guys support the show. So this week I've got 2 giveaways to do. They're both the same thing. I got these a long time ago, Luis, and I thought I'm going to have a use for these someday, and now I finally do. These are Japanese Izzet versus Golgari dual decks, and they're kind of cool. Like, they're fun to play if you know what the cards do. They're all in Japanese, which I think is kind of sweet, but also they've got some sweet stuff in there, Life from the Loam, Brainstorm, that kind of stuff in these bad boys. And I've got these plus some Channel Fireball gear that Channel Fireball was kind enough to give us for giveaways on the show as well. That's, deck box and life pad and some sleeves, that kind of stuff. And I've got 2 winners, so 2 different people are going to take home this little package here. First one, Ben Krantz. Guess where Ben's from, Luis?
Ben's from Oakland, California.
Correct. You read the show notes, but guess what? That's where you're from too. So your old neighbor, Ben Krantz, wins. Thank you so much, Ben, for your support. And on the other side of North America, we've got Jen and Neil S. They're from Perrysburg, Ohio, and they won the other copy of the Japanese Izzet versus Golgari and the CFB stuff. So thanks so much, guys, for supporting the show. If you want to look into it, you can do so at patreon.com/limited resources, and you can check that out there. Okay, one of the perks that you get, of course, by being on the Patreon is you get to submit listener questions. This one comes from John. He says, so it's been a while since the discussion has talked about results-oriented thinking. And by a while, he means, I think, last week and the week before. He says, I found myself in this trap a lot lately. Is there a time when thinking like that is okay? I thought that was a really interesting question. It's a simple question, right? Is it okay to be rowdy sometimes? And, the knee-jerk reaction is no, it's not. You shouldn't be. But there's actually kind of some different layers to it. What's your thoughts on when is it okay, or is it ever okay to be rowdy, Luis?
So this is a really confusing concept. It's really, it fights against our fundamental human nature. And the reason for that is if you don't know what a process is going to yield, how better to figure out whether it was a good or bad idea than see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? In a lot of ways, that is how we're programmed to work. Mm-hmm. If I'm like, well, I don't know, I guess I was going to use the example of shooting a basketball, but I know how that's going to work. I'm going to shoot. It's going to make it. But
80% or yeah.
No, but like imagine you start to shoot a basketball. You have not shot a basketball before. You're like Marshall, for example. You start shooting and you're off by like 6 feet. And you're like, okay, that was bad. But you use the knowledge you learned and you're like, okay, and you shoot again and you're off by 5 feet. And you use the results from the previous one to test it. Or you decide, I'm going to try baking cookies, and you try a couple different recipes, and every time
but then your basketball shot still doesn't go in. Yeah. Okay.
Right. and you see what the results are, and you build from there. Those are examples of a process that's good. And you shouldn't shoot the basketball then not look at where it lands, right? That wouldn't make any sense. But the confusing part is that we're talking, when we say don't be results oriented, we're talking about a situation where you can make a good decision, but it can end up poorly, because that is something that is counterintuitive and something we're not trained to do. And that's why this is such an easy trap to fall into. So one thing is, to John's question, is try to identify things that are where the process you need to figure out that where the process is such that the results inform what you should do next time, versus the times when you are making the theoretically correct decision and it's not working out, and therefore the results don't matter to the process.
Right. I think the key is people tend to go off course in two main ways. They oversimplify things. Oversimplification is a big one, or they don't have a proper sample size, right? Those are definitely two of the main ways that you can get off course when it comes to your thinking. And I think a way to do a quick check to make sure that you're doing it correctly is, have you thought about the situation or the card or whatever it is that you're doing in a big picture perspective? This is a lot of what the quadrant theory tries to address, right? Is that, I've definitely seen people play a magic card, make a play in a magic game correctly and lose, and then deduce that it's incorrect. And the problem with that is that they've only done it the once, right? And if you were able to do that 1,000 times and see that 78% of the time the play that you made was winning and correct, and then you do it 10,000 times and that number holds up, and you start to say, okay, I've got a really solid sample size here, and now I feel like I know that the play I made was correct. That's great. The problem is you basically never get to do that. And in Magic. And so what ends up happening instead is a lot of times people will take just that first stab at it. Just that first one. That's it. That's their whole sample size, and they're going to bank everything on that. This card sucks because I didn't win, or the line that I took was bad because I didn't win. And that's the fallacy, right? Is that you need to make sure that you're trying to apply logic to those situations and say, well, if I had done this 100 times or 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times, would it have changed? Would I still expect to win more? We talk about expected value on the podcast, and that's an oversimplification of it, but that is what it is. It's the idea of saying, if I repeated this over and over and over, infinite times, what would my expected value be? What should I expect from it on average? And
right.
And we play to that.
Right. I mean, so many of the things in our life fall into the first bucket, which I talked about, which is you need to figure out what each result gives you and then adjust based on that. But a lot of things don't. Like, if you've mapped it out and you know the fastest way to work, I don't know, I like the driving to work analogy, but it really works for the context of the podcast, especially since Marshall doesn't actually drive or go to work. But okay, so you're driving to basketball and you mapped it out. You know what the fastest route is. If you hit 2 red lights and it ends up being a little slower than the second fastest route, that doesn't mean you take the second fastest route the next time.
Right, exactly. And you wouldn't think that because you've driven it a lot of times and you know that this way is faster, right? But with Magic, it's so abstract,
It's hard, and with Magic, a lot of players, and us included, we haven't internalized all the things we need to do all the time. I mean, you're always learning new things, and you have to identify the difference between things that the results impact your decisions next time versus things where you made the right decision or you figured out a good process and you need to then ignore the results. And that's part of why Limited is so confusing, by the way.
Yeah.
Is the first 3 times I draft a deck, like a specific archetype, if I do poorly with it, I'm going to be a little down on that archetype. But I know in the back of my head that it's like a combination of like the fact that I lost in round 1 3 times with the same deck doesn't mean the deck is bad, versus maybe I haven't nailed how to draft the deck yet, right? So, and these results are showing that, and it's like somewhere in between those things where the results matter but they kind of don't, and that ambiguity is really hard to tease out. So it's tricky. That's why this stuff's so interesting.
Yeah.
There's no clear right answers for most of the questions we're asking.
Yeah. The thing I love about it is that, if I feel like somebody may be taking that shortcut, a lot of times it's kind of, like I mentioned, oversimplification, or even sometimes just laziness, right? Like, if you came up to me and said, nah, dude, I drafted that deck 3 times. I lost in the first round. It's not good. You don't want to draft that archetype. And if I just said to you, well, how did the games play out? Right? And you said, well, I lost. A lot of people, that's the end of the story for them. But I think that, the people that are willing to go a little deeper and say, actually, I mulliganed like 3 times in that first one and I lost. So I mulliganed to 6 and then I mulliganed to 5 and I never hit my 3rd land. So I didn't really get to play the archetype. So that's kind of a, there's a slight possibility that that's because of the archetype, right? It's too many colors or the mana's bad. But beyond that, that's kind of a write-off. You're like, well, that happens in Magic no matter how good your deck is. So then you go to the next one and you say, well, now that you mention it, my opponent had just an absurdly good draw both games. They curved 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, and then a combat trick. And I just couldn't, it wouldn't have mattered what I was doing. They just had that kind of draw. You're like, okay, interesting. And then you look at the last match and you say, well, I just lost a fair fight. Well, you can, if you start to delve into the data a little, you start to look at it and say, well, what do we really know here? What we really know is that this deck loses to the nut draw on a really great deck. Okay, that's true of all decks for the most part. And that it went toe-to-toe with another deck and happened to lose, and then it mulliganed a few times. This is not enough to just rest, to rest your case, right? This is enough to say, we don't really know yet what this deck is doing. But I'll tell you what, you're going to feel like, screw this deck. I can't win with it ever. It's terrible.
I've got a perfect example of this, and it demonstrates another reason why I think Owen Turtenwald is so good. I really enjoyed having him on the show, by the way.
No, he was great.
Before Grand Prix Houston, which he won with Rally the Ancestors, Standard Grand Prix, he went 14-1 with Hardened Scales on Magic Online. And at the end of it, his conclusion was this deck is not good enough.
That's insane.
And it wasn't, this win percentage isn't good enough. Clearly that's absurd win percentage. I talked to him and he's like, yeah, I played the deck. I went 14-1, but the deck didn't feel great. It felt like a lot of my wins were due to my opponents having bad draws or the deck playing out, kind of not great, but enough to win. And at the end of it, I concluded what the deck was doing at a base level, which wasn't powerful enough. And how many people do you know can walk away from a 14-1 win streak and come to the conclusion that this isn't the best deck? Or this is the deck
there's one on the list now.
Right. And that's a really good example of him not being results oriented. His job when he played those 15 matches with that deck wasn't to see what his win percentage was. It's not like he played 30 matches, 15 with Rally, 15 with Green White, to try to decide see which one had the higher win percentage. Right. It was, I'll play 15 matches with this deck that I didn't know at the beginning of these 15 matches and see how it feels throughout those 15 matches. And yeah, wins and losses mean something, but they clearly don't mean everything. And that was a good example, I think, of resisting the urge to just look at results. So
that's great stuff.
This was a great question. We had a mini, this is almost like a mini segment on it. But it's something that you'll hear us talk about a lot. We're going to return to a lot of these themes, being results oriented, having a plan. The reason we're going to say these things a lot is because they're hard. Every time we have kind of like new ways to package the information, we're going to try to do it because, look, if you're listening and you think like, I've heard enough about this, I guarantee you still probably you could make use of hearing a bit more about it. And we're not going to try to belabor it. We're not going to talk about, this sort of stuff every single week. But look, I play with a lot of people who are good and I watch them play and I know that like, these are lessons that anyone can benefit from, myself included, yourself included. It's not like we're all, perfect Magic players. Nobody is.
No, I see these mistakes from the lowest levels of competitive play, F&M all the way to people on the Pro Tour.
Yeah. So. And the reason is this stuff is hard.
Yeah. All right, let's get into our Crack-A-Draft. So if you haven't been with us for one of these, basically, we take this to, about as far as we can logistically here, which is that we do Crack-A-Pack on the show every episode. You guys know that. But we can only go so deep on one pack. And so what we like to do is to go a few picks deeper, and then that gives us an idea, or gives you an idea of how our thought process works, not just on pack 1, pick 1, but also pick 2, pick 3, and pick 4 as we see our deck start to develop. Now, normally what we'll do is we'll have a guest come on, and they'll usually be sitting next to me, and they'll take the seat of the players to our right, and then Luis and I will work through the pack together. Unfortunately, today, we're not on the road, we're not traveling, and I don't have anybody. Woody moved away, so I can't have him come over. So I'm going to be the players to the right, and we're going to focus on Luis here as the player in the hot seat. So it's going to be the listeners and Luis, and I'm going to be the other players. And then what we'll do is I'll walk you through what the players to the right picked and what their deck's starting to look like. And you guys, you, Luis, verbally, and you listening at home, can also start to try to speculate on what the people to your right are actually up to. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. So let's get into this. Our first pack comes from James O. Thank you, James. Now, I am going to go relatively quickly here. There's a lot of packs to get through, and that means that reading, all the comments doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's a little too slow. So
also,
go ahead.
At this point in the set, I think that we're generally going to focus on reading the uncommons and rares.
Yes.
With the commons, you could look them up if you're not familiar with every single common. You by no means have to be, but a lot of players are at this point.
Yeah, and it's just tough because we're going to be going through a lot of packs here, and in order to keep it expedient, we're going to have to cruise through. And I'll try to give reminders when I can. All right, so Luis, what I want you to do, since we don't need to go super deep on every card here, I want you to give us an idea of, is this in the realm of first pickability, or is this going in the, I'm not going to end up first picking this pile. Okay. So
this is closer to what you do when you have 30 seconds to make a first pick.
Exactly. And you know what, just for fun, let's pretend like you're at the Pro Tour. Okay. So you're sitting down, the camera's behind you, you're a feature drafter, and it's day one of the Pro Tour.
Sounds accurate so far.
Yeah. And it's day one of the Pro Tour. So you've just sat down, and this is your first time touching cards here at the PT. So, I want you to take it with that level of what you would actually do with the PT. Okay. So the first card is Press for Answers.
Not a card I'm looking to first pick.
Dauntless Cathar.
This will go on my short list. I have first pick Dauntless Cathar. Will do so again.
I do like that card too. Nagging Thoughts.
Not a card I'm looking to first pick, and worse than Press for Answers, as it turns out.
Indeed. Strength of Arms.
A solid combat trick, but worse than Dauntless Cathar.
Okay, I got a more solid combat trick. Confront the Unknown.
I like Confront the Unknown. I still wouldn't take it over Dauntless Cathar this early, but later in the draft, it's a very good clue, kind of like enabler.
Yeah. All right, here's one. Deadweight.
Deadweight is also great. I think I'm actually at the point where I'd first pick Dauntless Cathar over Deadweight.
Oh, look at you.
But it's pretty close.
Okay, so that's I have those two in the maybe pile.
For sure.
Vessel of Volatility, no.
No, the Red Vessel.
The Red Vessel, no, yeah. Kessig Dire Swine, the big pig. Macabre Waltz. I like the pig, but yeah, it's definitely not in the conversation.
That was a snuffling noise of disdain.
Yeah, okay, noted.
I would not take Macabre Waltz first pick.
Okay, I'm going to pull the double face card up here. It's Thraben Gargoyle.
It's just Thraben Gargoyle is a solid card. I think worse than either Deadweight or Dauntless Cathar. All
right, that leads us to our uncommons and rares. And, we went through that pretty quickly, but this is how it goes when you're drafting is, the commons, there's only a few, that really are going to catch your eye, and the rest aren't realistically in the running. The first uncommon is Behind the Scenes. It's 2 and a black enchantment. Creatures you control have Skulk, and you can pay 4 and a white to give creatures you control +1/+1 until end of turn.
So I've lost this card before, but every time I put it in my deck, I've been sorely disappointed. So
it's weird. I've never actually seen it in play yet.
I have, and I'm kind of off it.
Okay. This next one's pretty nice. Veteran Cathar.
Veteran Cathar is quite good. This is the 1 and a green for a 2/2, and you can pay 3 and a white to give a human double strike. It's of course a human. I think that it's legit better than the commons we're talking about here, just because it even if you don't end up in green white, it's a card of the high end, and then if you don't get there, you can still splash for it, and it's still just a solid card.
All right, next is Ulrich's Kindred. That's the 2 and a red 3/2 Trample Wolf, and you can pay 3 and a green to give target attacking wolf or werewolf indestructible until end of turn.
I think it's reasonably worse than all the 2 premium commons or Veteran Cathar.
Agreed. All right, your rare, and this is an interesting one. It's Thalia's Lieutenant.
All right. Well, I would start the draft, I think, by taking Thalia's Lieutenant here, just because if you end up in a green-white humans deck, the card's like pretty close to a 10 out of 10. Just a 2-mana 1/1 that gives all your creatures +1/+1 and then grows later is great. And even if you end up with a deck that's partially humans, then it's still playable because it only needs to really distribute 1 counter to be playable and 2 counters to be good, like whether it's on itself later or on come into play. So the ceiling is very, very high, and the floor is relatively high. This is a card. I mean, think of this as a card that you won't play a good third of the time or something like that.
Okay,
maybe more. But I would still take Thalia's Lieutenant here.
All right, so you are taking the Thalia's Lieutenant as your pack one pick one. As you can hear, I'm going through and trying to make my my next picks here. All right, so you take Thalia's Lieutenant, so I put that pile there. All of these get shifted off to the left, which means that they don't matter anymore. And you get past a pack. And by the way, this pack came from Peter. Thank you so much, Peter, for the pack. All right, so this goes there. I'm trying to make sure that I get this all sorted correctly. All right, so your next pack, you've got Thalia's Lieutenant in your pile, and you get past a pack that has Cathar's Companion, Human's Best Friend.
Yeah, I would not first pick Cathar's Companion unless I was in sore need of it. This is the 3/1 dog is not what I'm looking for.
You wouldn't second pick it either, though?
Oh, sorry, second pick it.
Lamplighter of Selhoff.
Yeah, I would not be looking to take this card. This card, if it frequently comes back with 3 cards in the pack.
You're not buying, you're selling. Emissary of the Sleepless.
Another very mediocre white card, so I haven't seen a signal yet.
Yeah, nothing great. Magmatic Chasm is your next card.
Another card which I hope to take late, if at all.
Yeah. Ghoul Caller's Accomplice.
A card which I haven't been very impressed with, but I guess right now is leading the pack. Still, I can't imagine second picking any of these cards.
Yeah, it is a human of note.
Black-White Humans isn't really a deck, though.
Agree. Seagraph Scob.
This is the zombie, the 1/3. I'm not really looking to take that either.
How about Twins of Maurer Estate?
This is the best card so far, and right now Twins is actually ahead. Even though it doesn't synergize at all with my first pick, part of what I'm trying to do here is just take the best card out of the second pack. Obviously, if it's between Twins and a card that it goes well with Thalia's Lieutenant and are both close, I will take the second card. But if everything else is on par with the first 4 cards you read, then I'll just take Twins.
Okay. Structural Distortion. No.
Not remotely playable.
All right, and here's our uncommons, which we somehow have 5 of. We've got we've got a foil one and a double-faced. Reaper of Flight Moonsilver.
Well, right now this is ahead of Twins. I think Reaper of Flight Moonsilver is a very playable card.
Yeah, and it's an angel, not a human, but 3/3 flyer for 5 mana. With Delirium, you can sacrifice a creature to give it +2/+1 until end of turn. Pretty good. Runaway Carriage.
4 mana, 5/6 trample.
Yeah.
And when it attacks or blocks, sacrifice it at end of turn.
Yeah. And end of combat, yeah.
I'm not excited about this card.
Yeah, no, that's not good. All right, now, speaking of not excited, I've got 2 pretty unexciting ones. I've got Foul Orchard, which is the green-black tap dual land, and I've also got Highland Lake, which is the red-blue tap dual land.
All right, well, neither of those share a color with my first pick or are cards I would even consider second picking, so I'm off it.
All right, well, this last one's a pretty good card. It's Accursed Witch.
All right, so that's the...
She's a human.
4 mana, 4/2 human. Your opponent's spells cost 1 less to target her, and then when she dies, you flip her into a curse on your opponent, which drains them for 1 every turn.
That's right. And also spells you cast that target enchanted player cost 1 less to cast.
I think I would take a Cursed Witch here.
Power level
ahead of the Flight Reaper of Flight Moonsilver. It's not so much... I mean, again, she doesn't really synergize with Thalia's Lieutenant. I know they're both humans, but Black-White Humans isn't really a thing. And maybe you end up with the pool where it is, but a Cursed Witch I think is so much better than Reaper that I'd lean towards that. And Reaper and Thalia's Lieutenant isn't like a Mondo combo because Thalia's Lieutenant and Delirium don't go together all that well either.
Right. Okay. All right. So I've opened that. I've got one of those.
And then presumably the villain took the rare.
Villain took the rare. That is correct.
All right. So I'm second picking a Cursed Witch. So I have a Thalia's Lieutenant and a Cursed Witch.
Yeah. So let's just check in here. What are you thinking right now? Are you happy right now? Or are you just feeling out the waters? Where are you at?
I'm medium right now. The person to my right taking a rare gives me basically no information since a Cursed Witch isn't like super high on the list of cards. Like, for example, Fiery Temper I think is better than a Cursed Witch. Mm-hmm. But So clearly the rare that the person on my right took doesn't have to be insane, but it's decent. A curse witch is good enough that the rare is like there's a pretty wide band of rares that could be taken. There's no color preference at all. I have no idea what color they are. Right now I've got a Thalia's Lieutenant, so I would like, if humans of some kind, white green preferably, is open, I would like to go that direction.
Okay.
But if not, that's fine too. And then there's an Accursed Witch, which doesn't point me in any specific direction. So I'm definitely not black-white humans. Do not look at the fact that I have a Thalia's Lieutenant and a Accursed Witch and think that. I've got a black card and a white card, and the white card likes humans. The black card, one of the reasons the witch is so good is that she just goes with everything.
Noted. You're black-white humans. Got it.
All right. Yep. That's the whole.
All right. Here, let me just get caught up right quick here. This is getting kind of interesting, actually. I shouldn't say anything. Okay, this is the next one. Okay, so this pack comes from Alex. Thank you so much, Alex. And this, and then I got another one from Matt that I'm just getting out of the way now because I've already opened it. All right, so Accursed Witch, Thalia's Lieutenant, Vessel of Paramnesia is your first one.
Not one of the vessels that I consider good.
Chaplain's Blessing, not going to gain life.
Not a playable card, no.
Niblis of Dusk.
Moderate playable, but I'd be very disappointed if I was taking Niblis here.
Yeah. Shard of Broken Glass.
It's a playable card in some humans decks or some Delirium decks, but I don't have enough information right now to want to prioritize. It's more of a niche card than anything else.
Okay. Sanguinary Mage.
I am not really looking to take that here. It's a red card that goes with spells, which is very far away from where I am.
Grotesque Mutation.
So, +3/+1 lifelink is a good trick. I guess that's the card I'm taking right now, but I'm really unhappy if that's the case.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. How about Vampire Noble? 3/2 for 3?
That's pretty medium. I think it's worse than Grotesque Mutation on balance.
Okay. Groundskeeper. That's our
uncommon. I like Groundskeeper in some build-around roles, but I'm not after my first two picks, and it's not really the human I want to combo with Thalia's Lieutenant.
Right. I actually missed a common because it's a foil. Pyrehound.
All right, another build-around, which doesn't go well with the cards I have at all.
The build-around hound.
Yeah.
Rise from the Tides. 5 and a blue sorcery. You get a 2/2 black zombie for each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. They enter the battlefield tapped.
So it's actually kind of interesting, but I think I might take Rise here, or at least so far.
That is interesting.
Because I'm seeing no cards that go with my first two picks in any way, shape, or form. Basically, right. I would take, if I saw a Dauntless Cathar or a Deadweight or a Twins of Mara Estate or any common of that caliber or more, I would take it. But barring that, I would rather just take Rise. It's a great build around and a very powerful card. It's like a key card for the blue-red deck. Plus, there's a Pyrohound in the deck too, and a Sanguinary Mage. So it's not that I think necessarily something will wheel out of this pack because it's a little light of a pack, but it's more like there's a lot of cards for this archetype and no one has taken any of them. So I can conclude that it's open for at least two people, and to my right, and Rise is just so much better than the rest of the cards. So I'm not going to be happy if I have to take Rise from the Tides here, but again, this is an example of why you should not feel locked in.
Right. You're only 2 picks in. There's still a whole lot of packs to go. Spiteful Motives, 3 and a red. Enchantment Aura with Flash, and it gives a creature +3/+0 and first strike.
Another powerful card. I don't hate Spiteful Motives. I think it's reasonable to consider it here. I don't love Spiteful Motives and Accursed Witch as a combination just because they're both a little expensive for a black-red aggro deck. I mean, you certainly play Spiteful Motives. It's quite good, and you play Accursed Witch, but I don't want to start out by taking 2 4-drops. Maybe that doesn't matter. And Thalia's Lieutenant and Spiteful Motives do go together pretty well. So Spiteful Motives actually might just be a better pick than Rise here because it combines relevantly with my first 2 picks. One of the 2, not all 3.
Last card is a rare. It's Brain in a Jar. I don't think I want to read it.
It's a sweet card, but I'm not taking Brain in a Jar. It charges up and plays spells for free, but let's not do that. So
what do you like? Rise from the Tides or Spiteful Motives? Go with your Accursed Witch.
I don't really like either of these choices. I'm taking a third color of card when one of the 2 cards basically can't get played with my first 2 cards. Maybe you play Accursed Witch and Rise from the Tides in the same deck, but I cannot imagine a deck that plays Thalia's Lieutenant and Rise from the Tides.
Right.
I think the safest pick is certainly Spiteful Motives because, I'm going to take Spiteful Motives. As much as I like Rise from the Tides, Spiteful Motives is just a good card in an aggressive deck, whether that's a white-red or red-black deck, and it's at least a powerful card. So you start. I mean, I'm starting the draft with cards of 3 different colors. That's not good, but all 3 are powerful. So at least they can, whichever direction I go, if it's in one of these colors, I'll have at least a card for it.
Okay, and this will be your last pick here for this one. We may just do another. You've got Inquisitor's Ox.
Yeah, I'm not really in for Inquisitor's Ox. It's a card I rarely play.
Well, if you don't like 2/5s, how do you feel about 1/5s?
Silent Observer?
Yep.
Again, not a card I'm looking to take here.
Survive the Night, +1/+0, and Indestructible, plus Investigate, and instant speed.
Yeah, it's a moderate combat trick, but not something I'm interested in.
All right. Magmatic Chasm.
Still no.
Ghoul Caller's Accomplice again.
I'm warming up to the Ghoul Caller's Accomplice here. Right. At this point, it's a cheap creature, and it looks like I'm skewing aggressive regardless of which direction that is.
Yeah, unlike the body that he just dug up, you're warming up to him. Alms of the Vein.
Not a card I've considered playing.
I lost that card yesterday. Reduced to Ashes.
It's a playable. Yeah. It doesn't go very well with Spiteful Motives. I think I would still just take Ghoul Caller's Apprentice over Reduced Ashes.
Okay.
I just don't like Reduced Ashes.
How about Confront the Unknown?
Still not really looking to take a green combat trick here.
All right. Weirding Wood, I'm assuming, is not on the table.
No. You can make a table out of it, though.
It looks like a table. Highland Lake. Again, that's the blue-red tap land. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not into that.
And you've got a rare.
I do it.
It's Fortified Village.
the green-white land.
Green-white land.
All right, I guess I'm taking Ghoul Caller's Accomplice.
You really did it.
I guess. These packs have not been good.
No.
Like here's the thing, and this is actually another useful lesson. Yes, sometimes you look at packs and you just feel like you're just getting completely owned, like I have been there before. But if the packs are bad for everyone, it's not as much of a disaster as you might think. It's still bad because the other side of the table is not necessarily seeing these terrible packs in the first 4 picks, which are more important than 5 through 8. Mm-hmm. But what colors could I have been in right now for these first 4 picks to go well? Like if I had taken Deadweight, Accursed Witch, Spiteful Motives, Ghoul Caller's Accomplice, I guess I'd be feeling a little better, but I'm still third picking a Spiteful Motives when I'm not red yet. I'm fourth picking like a Ghoul Caller's Accomplice. Like none of these situations sound great to me.
No, and these packs have in fact been quite weak. But as you would imagine, and why don't we go over it here? So you've got 3 players to your right. The furthest player away first picked a Sinister Concoction.
All right.
They took that over Deadweight.
I have to imagine that at least one of, and maybe 2 of these players are taking green cards, because I guess maybe not because there's a Weirding Wood and a Confront the Unknown in the last pack, but haven't seen really a playable green card and haven't really gotten past a playable white card.
Okay, well, let's take a look. So the person 2 to your right, first picked Solitary Hunter.
Okay.
And then they took the Deadweight that got passed to them. So they are currently in green-black. So Solitary Hunter and Deadweight.
Gotcha.
And then the person directly to your right did take that rare. You mentioned it. They first picked a Diregraph Colossus.
Okay, the zombie. That's not great.
Yeah, the other option was the Accursed Witch. So it was one of those 2.
Yeah, I think Diregraph Colossus is better.
And this person decided that they were going to go full zombie. And then immediately followed that up with Byway Courier.
So there was 2 green drafters.
Yes, indeed. And then they went off the reservation a little bit here on this last pack. Again, this is the one that has the Weirding Wood, the Confront the Unknown, the Ox, the Survive, and they took 3rd pick Abyssinian Missionaries.
Yeah, I think that I like that pick as well, just because it's such a high upside. So we're black-white getting passed to by black-white. You're
black-white getting passed to by black-green-white, and by green-black, and by black.
Actually, realistically, the person with Byway Courier, Missionaries, and Diregraph is more likely to end up green-white than they are black-white.
Totally.
Or black-green, but
yeah. The Diregraph Colossus fell off pretty quickly for them.
It's not a good spot. So the one saving grace is that red looks currently open. I mean, we don't know what the rest of the packs will look like.
Yeah.
It's possible the Spiteful Motives could give rise to kind of aggressive red theme. I don't think that taking Rise Float Heads would have worked out poorly, by the way. Though their next pick would still have been really bad.
Yes, it would not have helped you. You would have taken Reduced to Ashes,
I guess, but that's not even a good card.
No, it's not. Or Highland Lake or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think that the key point, though, and I think the part that it was really interesting for me to see, having a lot more knowledge about what was coming and what had already been taken, was when you turned the corner and you said, all right, I'm going to take a red card third pick here over a mediocre card in my colors. And I thought that was really smart, just because I'm looking at the packs here, right? And I'm like, oh, dude, don't stay on this path, right? And it's funny because when we're in the booth at the Pro Tour covering a draft match, which you don't get to do because we're usually covering you in a draft match, is we actually get people in our ear. The floor reporters will tell us who's in what colors around our featured drafter. So they'll say like, oh, the person to their right's in the same colors, or, the person to their left who's passing to them for this pack just switched into their main color. Right. And we get a chance to actually see that stuff. And it's funny because when you draft on your own, you really never get that info. The best you can do is to, like, if you're drafting in real life, is to go over to the person on your left or your right and just look, play against them or see what they've drafted and say, oh, you were in the same colors as me. How did that happen? Or, what did you first pick? And, if they're willing to talk to you, they will. But most of the time, on Magic Online and a high level tournament, you might just never find out exactly what everybody else was up to. And certainly not piecing it together in terms of player A, B, C, maybe even D to my right, what were they all drafting? What did you first pick? How did this all come together? And, when you get to see it like how we do it here, it's so clear, right? I'm just like, don't do it, man. Your life is going to be hell if you're sitting here trying to force through this, black, white, or whatever, colors you ended up in against the grain. You are in for a very long draft because that's a lot of picks that you're getting filtered out of. But you were smart and said, all right, well, I'm going to take one of these higher upside cards. And you hedged a little bit and took the Spiteful Motives, which seems correct to me too, because like you said, that goes well with the Thalia's Lieutenant and maybe even the Cursed Witch. Either of those two color combos you could end up in. Where if you take the Rise from the Tides, you're going into a new color and a completely new archetype. You're basically scrapping your first two cards in a lot of scenarios. And
Rise
I like
from
the
Tides. I've only found it to be playable in blue-red exactly. Like I had one blue-green deck and one black-blue deck that was playable in, but it was still just like borderline in those decks.
Yeah.
Whereas blue-red is where it shines. And I could have taken it there, but that would have been again. I don't mind abandoning my first couple picks, but Spiteful Mode is also a good card. I'm not unhappy about having that card in my deck, so it seemed safer to take that. It's hard to tell exactly where this draft would be developed from here because after 4 picks, I have Thalia's Lieutenant, a Cursed Witch, Spiteful Motive, and Gulkar's Accomplice. I'm pretty much off Thalia's Lieutenant at this point. I haven't seen another human or a really good white card. Mm-hmm. But I'm not really on black or red. I have a very tentative grasp on everything. So basically, any card that's playable that I see 7th pick, I'm just going to latch onto that.
Yeah.
Because I really need to find something. And after pack 1, it becomes a lot harder to bounce around so much. But this is a draft that's very much in flux. Like I've had drafts where after the first 4 picks, I'm pretty sure where I'm going to end up because you just got past enough good cards of a certain archetype that you can rule it out that the people to your right are playing it. In this draft, I don't even know what's going on. Like I had made some assumptions, but it was hard to really tell.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, you're pretty open.
Not in the good way.
In the bad way.
I have 11 black cards.
No, I know.
I have 3 cards of 4 different colors after 12 packs.
All right. Well, let's do another one of these real quick. I'm going to kind of burn through this, but I do think that this is useful and something that we don't get to do that often. Plus, all of these rares go into the pile for our giveaway, so that's kind of cool for the listeners. This one comes from Andy and Sean. And they do, I think it's called the Commander's Brew. I think it's like a podcast. So thank you, guys. This is your pack 1, pick 1. I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly again. And like I said, it's a little tough if you don't know the cards. I do apologize, but we will make sure to read them clearly and you can look them up if you have to. But for a lot of our listeners, they are going to be familiar with the cards. And, this is the type of thing that we don't do often, partially for that reason. Inquisitor's Ox. No.
Still no.
Just the Wind.
I have first picked this card, and I'm not really happy about it. I mean, it's a good bounce spell. That's about it.
That was a pretty sick dagger on BK last night, by the way.
Which one?
You said that's what he needed at his GPs, just to win.
Oh, yes.
Cathar's Companion.
Still not a card I'm looking to take this early.
Moldgraph Scavenger.
I do like Moldgraph Scavenger, but I like wheeling Moldgraph Scavenger more than I like first picking it.
There you go. Senseless Rage.
I like Senseless Rage. It's certainly better than it appears, but I would not take it over just the win first pick.
Okay. What about Clipwings?
Straight up sideboard card.
Rotten Heart Ghoul.
Marginal playable at best.
All right, we're warming up here. How about Murderous Compulsion?
All right, this is what I've got leading the pack right now. Murderous Compulsion is, I think, pretty good, and certainly a card that's worthy of first picking.
Well, we're heating up real hot now. Fiery Temper.
All right, never mind. Fiery Temper is just like a better Murderous Compulsion.
There you go. Dance with Devils is our first uncommon.
This is 3 in a red for an instant. Puts 2 1/1 devils into play, and then when they die, they deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Worse than Fiery Temper.
Worse than Fire Temper, but good.
Yeah, still good, but I think worse than Murderous Compulsion as well.
Agreed. All right, I forgot our double face card. It's Pious Evangel, which is an uncommon. It turns into Wayward Disciple.
This is a 2/2 that gains you life when you play a creature into a 2/4 that drains your opponent when you lose a creature.
That's right.
I like Fiery Temper more.
Same. Cult of the Waxing Moon, the 5/4 for 4 and a green. And whenever a permanent you control transforms into a non-human creature, you get a 2/2 wolf.
It's a kind of like replacement level card. It's not anything special.
Yeah, it's a solid card, but
like however good you think the Thornhive Wolves are, the 5 mana 4/5, this is about that good.
Right. Murderer's Axe. That's the 4 colorless equipment. The creature gets +2/+2, and to equip it, you discard a card.
I played this card a couple times, and I've been highly unimpressed.
Same. Yeah, I only had it be good once, and even then, good might be stretching it. Oh, all right. Oh, this is good. So I'm assuming there's not a ton of rares that would take you off of Fiery Temper, right?
No, there's not.
There's a few. I wonder if this is one of them. It's Tireless Tracker. Oh, yeah. So 2 and a green, 3/2, and it has landfall. I'm just calling it. It has landfall, investigate, and whenever you sacrifice a clue, it gets a +1/+1 counter.
Oh yeah, Tireless Tracker is absurd. It's one of the best cards in the set.
Yeah,
so
it's amazing.
Basically, it's a 3/2 that can like draw you a card every turn with the use of some mana and just grows wildly. So while you're spending this mana drawing extra cards, you're getting a giant creature out of the deal, so you're not even really getting that much behind on board.
All right, so Tireless Tracker it is. This next pack comes from Stuart from Toronto. Thank you, Stuart. Sorry, I have to make my pick out of it first before I start reading. All right, I have made my pick. Okay, Inspiring Captain. So I like this card now.
Yeah, it's a fine card. And if I end up green-white, obviously it's quite good. So yeah, I could take it here, but I'm not really looking to.
Catalog?
I'm definitely not taking Catalog.
What about Hound of the Farbogs? Somehow the worst hound in the set.
Yeah, I do not like Hound of the Farbogs. It is playable if you really need it, but yeah, you should not be taking it here.
Ethereal Guidance. That's the 2 and a white sorcery. Creatures you control get +2/+1.
It's bad news if you have to read the card, because that means it's a card no one's ever seen.
I know. I felt compelled to read it because I was like, nobody's going to remember what this does. Drownyard Explorers. There's some clues for you. The 2/4 for 4 that you investigate.
Yeah, it's not good. I mean, it's a good card, but it's not a good card to second pick over. Not really much yet so far, but it's just not a card I anticipate second picking.
But all the clues. Crow of Dark Tidings.
I could. Crow of Dark Tidings is decent. I right now I think I'd take Crow.
Okay, Uncaged Fury.
+1/+1 double strike.
Yeah.
Fine card. It's a combo with Tireless Tracker, I guess, but I'm not taking it over Crow.
What about Watcher in the Web?
2/5 can watch all the webs.
Yeah, or at least 8 of them.
It's not bad. It's decent with Tireless Tracker because Tracker gives you such a good long game advantage that having a way to stay alive is good. But I wouldn't be thrilled about it.
Now, this is the first green card that we've gotten out of the pack here. Is that a consideration at all? Like how much are you into staying in green?
Not really. I mean, look, I'm going to try as hard as I can to play Tireless Tracker. When you have one of the top 10 cards in the set, you're going to try and put it in your deck. But Watch the Web, first of all, is not a signal for me because the person on my right, there's any number of cards they could take over the Watcher. And it's not really a signal. I'm passing to the left. I'm not really worried about that. So
right.
I will take this card potentially, but I think I'd rather still have the Crow over this. So I'd probably take Watcher over the Crow. Right now, this is my pick. It's just not a pick I'm excited to make.
All right. Uncommons. Compelling Deterrence. So 1 in the blue, instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Then that player discards a card if you control a zombie.
This is a fine card, but doesn't combine all that well with Tireless Tracker. It is just a bounce spell, which I guess is fine.
Yeah, and the fact that it's non-land permanent does pop up more often than I thought it would. Just bouncing something really annoying, especially off of a creature, can be quite good. Wildfield Scarecrow.
I like Wildfield Scarecrow. I think this is my pick right now.
Okay.
This is a 3-mana 1/4. You can pay 2 and sack it to search the library for 2 lands and put them in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good Delirium enabler. It's a good 3-color deck enabler. It's a combo Tireless Tracker gets you more lands.
There you go. Morcrit Necropod. That's the 6-mana 5 and a black 7/7 slug horror with menace, and whenever it attacks or blocks, you sack another creature or land.
A fine card, but I think not as good as Wildfield Scarecrow in this position.
All right, now. Okay, so we've got a rare as well as a double face card here. So the rare is Asylum Visitor, which is the 1 and a black 3/1 vampire wizard, and it's got madness for 1 and a black. And at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, you draw a card and lose 1 life.
I think Asylum Visitor is a fine card. It's basically just a 2-mana 3/1 madness card because the clause of having no cards in hand doesn't come up all that often.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a great combo with Tireless Tracker, and I don't think it's so much better than Wildfield Scarecrow that I wouldn't want to take Wildfield Scarecrow first. Also, another thing to note here.
Yeah.
We're saying don't get married to your first picks, but Tireless Tracker is splashable because you can, even casting this on turn 5, then playing a land is still great.
Yeah.
And Wildfield Scarecrow helps splash it. So
yeah,
one good reason to take Wildfield Scarecrow is even if you end up like white-black, you could still just splash Tireless Tracker and it's a fantastic card. Like that's one of the reasons the card is so good. It only has a single colored mana and its casting cost. So don't get married to your first pick doesn't mean wildly abandon it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I like that you found a way to support the first pick without, directly playing to it. Our double face card is an uncommon. It's Kessig Forgemaster. It's 1 and a red for a 2/1. Whenever it blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, it does 1 damage to that creature. And then if it transforms in the normal werewolf way, it becomes a 3/2 with that same ability, except for it's 2 damage instead of 1.
All right. Well, I'm just going to take Kessig Forgemaster then.
All right.
I think red-green is a fine deck, and Forgemaster is good enough. It's better than Wildfield Scarecrow, so I'll take that and see where things go.
Okay. Next pack is from Brent from GP Toronto. So let me see what old Brent is taking here. Oh God, not that card. Anything but that card. All right. So Brent's going to take that one. Pass pack here. And probably that one. No, that one. All right. Okay, so your pack, when it comes to you, has Ember Eye Wolf in it.
Look, I second pick this at the Pro Tour. I'm not third picking it in our class.
You've drawn
I'm planting. I'm throwing down my feet here. We're not taking it.
That's good. I admire you for for that. Hulking Devil, the 5/2 for 4.
Not taking that one either.
Kessig Dire Swine. That's in your colors.
It is, but not a card I really want in red-green very often.
Equestrian Skill.
Not really looking to take this third either. None of these cards are good enough to take this early.
Furtive Homunculus.
Yeah, it doesn't combine well with my first 2 cards and isn't a particularly good card, so I'm probably not going to take it.
Ooh, here's one. How about Angelic Purge?
I do like Angelic Purge. So this is high on my list of cards to take right now. Whether or not it doesn't combine with both my first 2 picks, but it doesn't matter. Angelic Purge is a great card.
Okay. Intrepid Provisionier.
The 3/3 that gives a human +2/+2.
Yeah.
Not as good as Angelic Purge. In fact, enough worse that I would still just take the Purge.
Okay, but it is in your colors, and both of your creatures are human.
It's true,
okay. But still, Purge
two
just
reasons
too
not
good.
to. One is that in red-green, you end up with enough 4-drops, and you end up with a lot of werewolves. You want to enable something like Hellpack Resurgence, for example. Mm-hmm. So the Intrepid Provisioner is not really what you're looking for. Also, Angelic Purge is just a premium card. And third pick, you should be taking premium cards over kind of medium cards, even if they're in all different colors, just because you're trying to figure out where you're going.
Right. Deadweight.
Okay, I like Deadweight. I think it's worse than Angelic Purge, so I would take Angelic Purge, but it's interesting information to know that there's a Deadweight here.
Okay, there's a Devilthorn Fox, which I'm assuming you're not taking over Purge. There's a Spectral Shepherd, that's 2 and a white for a 2/2 flying spirit. You can pay 1 and a blue to return target spirit you control to its owner's hand.
No, worse than Deadweight or the Angelic Purge.
Okay, Gibbering Fiend. 1 and a red, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, it does damage to your opponent, and if you've got Delirium, it pings them every turn.
Probably the worst card in that cycle of
yeah, it's pretty cards. Bad. Mm-hmm. Been really unimpressed by Gibberine Fiend. Now it is red. You're still on Purge over Fiend, right?
I am on Purge over Fiend by a lot. Yeah.
All right. The rare is in the pack. Hate this card. It's Triskaidekaphobia.
I do like this card. I think it's powerful, but it's not a card I'm taking over Angelic Purge, especially since this is the kind of card I like taking near the end of the draft when you know you're like a black-based aggro deck. I'm just very far away from that. I don't have black cards. And I kind of have aggro cards, but the thing is, black-green isn't particularly aggressive either, so unless I end up black-red, I guess I could see it. But either way, I think Angelic Purge is the pick. Worth noting, there's a deadweight in the pack. Worth noting, still haven't really gotten past a good green card. And got past a Forge Master, but that's about it for red. So still not really sure what is going on yet.
Okay. I am opening up the pack.
I also like how we're obviously just opening the packs right now. We didn't set this up ahead of time, but somehow both my drafts, I have 3 different cards of 3 different colors in first 3 picks.
Yes. Yeah, you're very disciplined.
But, I think that's what this format is.
I do too.
I think there's a higher rate of that than another format.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. This is from George Wright, by the way, from GP Toronto. So now I'm looking at this person. All right, that's an easy one. And now this person. And I'm going to stick with this as well. Okay, so your pack. This is your 4th pick and final one for this installment here of Crack a Draft. This is a Vessel of Paramnesia. No. Chaplain's Blessing.
Still no.
Stallion of Ashmouth.
It's a playable card, more than I think most people give it credit for, but still no.
Okay, how about another Intrepid Provisioner?
I guess that's leading the pack right now, but I'm not excited about it.
Thornhide Wolves?
It is worth noting that we've just seen 2 Intrepid Provisioners in a row. I mean, that is a good card. So if I end up, let's say, look at Tireless Tracker plus Angelic Purge as the beginnings of green-white, seems like those cards are at least somewhat open, though 3rd and 4th pick isn't a huge signal.
Right. Thornhide Wolves.
Worse than Intrepid Provisioner.
Right. Rancid Rats.
Not a card I'm really interested in with the 3 cards I have right now.
Yeah.
Because it's just not a good signal. It's on par with Provisioner, maybe a little worse, and I'd rather just have Provisioner.
Clipped Wings.
Still a straight-up sideboard card.
Yep. Stone Quarry. It's kind of interesting. That's the red-white dual land. You do have a Forge Master and an Angelic Purge here.
Right, but I can't really imagine splashing for Forge Master, and I don't really want to splash for Angelic Purge, so it's more like, if I were red-white, I would take this card, but I'd rather take Provisioner and keep my options for green-white open, because if you're... Look, okay. I like mana fixing, but if you're a straight 2-color deck, it's not critical to have dual lands.
No. Paranoid Perish Blade.
Okay, I do like that one, and it's good in Delirium. And right now, Angelic Purge and Tireless Tracker both go very well in a green-white Delirium strategy. So right now, I've got Paranoid Perish Blade at the top of my list.
All right. We've got Convicted Killer.
Not a
double-faced card.
Yeah, not a particularly impressive card.
And then your rare, and it happens to be a foil, is Invocation of Saint Traft, which is bad.
So this card probably gets a little bit more eyes on it because it evokes, Geist of Saint Traft, which is one of the best cards in original Innistrad.
Yeah.
But I think the best description of Invocation of Saint Traft is Feast of the Unicorn, it's a bad Feast of the Unicorn. And that's a really old card from Homelands that gives +4/+0 for 4 mana. It's an aura. And that's kind of what this card is. It's not a good card.
Yeah, it's not very good. So you're going to take the Perish Blade?
Oh, yeah. I actually don't think that's particularly close, because if I'm taking the Intrepid Provisioner, it's not because I want to be red-white, or red-green rather, because it's just not great in red-green. It's leaning more towards green-white, and I think that the Paranoid Perish Blade is much better in green-white, especially given that I already have an Angelic Purge.
So your picks are Tireless Tracker, Kessig Forge Master, Angelic Purge, and Paranoid Perish Blade. You feeling better about this one than the last draft?
Oh yeah, a lot better. First of all, I've got Tireless Tracker, which is better than any card I had in the other one by a lot.
Yeah.
Second of all, I've gotten 3rd and 4th picks solid white cards that are good in Delirium, so that's already like a bit of a signal. And they're both fine in like green-white humans. Or even red-white humans. Maybe I do get cut off of green and don't play Tireless Tracker. It's not like I lost out by taking the Perish Blade and Angelic Purge. I think I haven't seen a particularly good blue card besides like a Compelling Deterrence. And I saw a Deadweight.
Yep.
I saw 1 red card. So I'm not very clear about what I'm getting past to, except it seems like white is open.
Yeah. Yeah, you are correct. So let's get into the picks here. So the player directly to your right decided to move in on werewolves early and took Gyre Reach Bandit, the 2 in a red rare 3/2 with haste, and you can, if it's transformed, it becomes a 4/3, and it says whenever a werewolf enters the battlefield under your control, you may transform it. The problem, of course, was that they had to pass you the Kessage Forge Master in order to do that. But staying on plan, they took a Lambholt Pacifist next pick over Angelic Purge or Deadweight. Okay. And then they took a Cult of the Waxing Moon as their third pick, again trying to stay on this werewolf deck and maybe get paid off later, and passing you the Perish Blade and a few other cards there, the Convicted Killer being one that they would probably be interested in.
So I think that there's a good chance that even if we get forced off green here, we end up splashing Tireless Tracker. But if we don't, it's also not a disaster either.
Right.
And white does seem open.
The person 2 to your right first picked a Reckless Scholar.
Okay.
And then they took a Fiery Temper that they got past.
All right, so they're
moving in that direction pretty hard. And then the person 3 to your right first picked, and this is kind of interesting. We don't get a lot of information off of this person, but it is kind of interesting. They first picked a Silver Fur Partisan, so that's another green rare. So you've got to your right red, green, and somebody who, at least in my mind, I was trying to be the person that kind of forces an archetype. They say, okay, I opened up a werewolf, I'm moving in. And so they went werewolf, and werewolf enabler. Then you've got a blue-red, probably spells / madness deck forming, and then you've got another green drafter over to your right as well.
Yeah, that sounds accurate. I mean,
so I like where you're going with white, but
we don't know where those people are going to go exactly. But
no,
yeah.
All right, so good stuff. Hopefully that's helpful for everybody listening at home to go a little deeper into the picks and get a chance to hear Luis's thought process. His and I's are quite similar when it comes to this stuff. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a topic here. We wanted to hit on some talking points about Shadows over Innistrad, since that's what we decided to make the topic on was touching in on Shadows here. And
part of it too is that our last 2 weeks have been kind of more theory. Like level up stuff that I think is very useful to overall development as a player, but we didn't touch on too much set specific knowledge. So we're going to kind of dive in on a couple different topics within the world of Shadows over Innistrad.
Right. So the first thing that I wanted to bring up, because I got to know if I'm alone here or what's going on, but I've been feeling kind of weird about the format. I'm having a hard time getting a foothold when it comes to the decks. I feel like when I hit submit or when I'm done with my draft, a lot of the time my deck is kind of muddy. It's not super clear. Looking back to like Battle for Zendikar, for example, that set was on rails, right? I mean, you for the most part picked an archetype, committed to it, and you were rewarded for doing so. And that was maybe a good thing about the format, maybe not. Depending on your perspective on that kind of thing. But is it possible that Shadows over Innistrad feels a little too far in the other direction? Like that, there's these tribal decks that are pretty clean cut, right? You look at the werewolves deck and maybe even the vampires deck or something. And the werewolves is the one that really stands out to me as pretty, the payoff cards say werewolf all over them. They're either werewolves themselves or they care about werewolves. It's just 2 colors. You know what you're going for and that's it. But then it feels like most of the other decks aren't like that. And I honestly haven't decided if this is like a feature or a bug of the format. It kind of is bothering me, but maybe I'm just haven't quite sorted it out for myself yet. What are your thoughts on this?
I like things being a little off rails. Even when the last 2 sets, like between Battle for Zendikar, Oath of the Gatewatch, and now Shadows, have a lot of like synergy type decks, which, we do tend to enjoy. This one is a lot more freeform than the other 2, and I think that's good. It's a different experience. It's not the same thing. And it provides you a lot more customization, and it makes each draft feel more different than the last one. Again, if you're playing BFZ, once you settled into your 2 colors, a lot of what you're doing within that color pair is just going to be the same. Like when you're black-white, you were going to play allies. Like what else were you going to do?
Yeah, it felt like algorithm drafting at some point. And that could happen pretty early too, right? Like you could be halfway through the first pack or 2/3 of the way through the first pack, and you're like, well, I know what this deck's going to look like. I don't know how good of a version it's going to be, but I know all the cards, I know all the picks, and I know what's going to happen from here. And I do find that not awesome. But the question is, if you turn the knob all the way in the other direction, where there aren't really defined archetypes and every deck you put together is kind of, well, here's a pile of these cards that have some loosely interconnected ideas, but you're not really hitting a home run that often with that. At what point does that go too far, and does Shadows hit that?
I guess it goes too far when there's just no themes at all. Mm-hmm. But we're not really there.
We're not there.
We're actually in a kind of strange world, and I didn't really realize it until you brought it up, that there are some decks that are heavily themed, right? Red-green Whirls with Howlpack Resurgence, or green-white aggro humans, black-red Vampire's Madness, sure. But there's a lot of like green-white or blue-green or black-green or black-white decks that just kind of float in the middle that have like, these like clusters of combos in them, which is kind of interesting, where you've got these like groups of 2 to 4 cards or 2 to 6 cards that
that's interesting,
that combine well.
Okay,
but your whole deck isn't about it.
Right. So instead of having this big picture outlook, you're sort of webbing together these chunks of synergy into one form, but it's not necessarily like a big picture coherent type thing.
Exactly. And so like one of the things is like, let's say you're looking at green-white Delirium or green-black Delirium. There, it is more cohesive as a whole because all of the cards, tend to either be Delirium enablers or payouts or good control cards or ways to keep you alive. Mm-hmm. But change a couple cards and all of a sudden you might have these like mini combos in it that are aided by the overall synergy but aren't really part of it. Like, like Stern Constable plus Groundskeeper is like a mini combo that I think that both cards can kind of justify themselves in a deck, and then when you have them together, they're very good.
Okay.
Or you have like a blue-red or black-red deck that has like 2 to 3 Madness cards and 2 to 3 Madness outlets. You wouldn't describe either as a Madness deck.
Right.
But it has cards that once you have a Tormenting Voice and a catalog that you want to play in your like Spells Matter deck, your Pyrohound Rise from the Tides deck, you all of a sudden start looking at Bloodmad Vampire and thinking like, well, this is a card I want to put in my deck. This is a 4/1 cantrip. It draws me an extra card.
Right.
So what I think that one of the keys to this format is kind of knowing how each card relates to all the other cards, especially the cards that it cares about, so that when you end up like with a Graph Mole in your deck, knowing which clue cards are good, or how to best like make use of like a Neglected Heirloom to flip your, to get a couple flip cards in your deck, or Abyssinian Missionaries to take advantage of equipment. It's like there are these dedicated archetypes, but there's also a lot of decks in between, and they can take a mishmash of those decks. And that's one of the reasons I like the like green-based decks that with like black or white or even sometimes blue, that can grab the clue synergies if they're there. It can grab the equipment synergies if they're there. It can grab the Delirium synergies, and it can, or even Madness sometimes, and it can combine all of those cards and take what you see and make a bunch of different like team ups of cards that do something good.
Okay. Yeah. It's been really interesting because I normally prefer the wide open formats the most. Those are the ones that I've tended to gravitate towards, where when you start your draft and you're even a couple of picks in and you have no clue where this deck's going to end up. I think the thing that I've been stumbling on a little bit is just that, like, I don't even know where I necessarily want these decks to end up sometimes. And that I do find a little concerning when it's so open-ended that I don't even really have a proper vision for, okay, well, if things go well and I open this and I pick well, then I could get a really sweet blankety blank deck. Instead, it's like, I hit submit and I'm like, what does this deck do again? And I'm starting to like piece together all these little, separate things like how you described. And I don't know. I think maybe it's just taking me a little longer than normal to get fully comfortable with those, again, more muddy archetypes. But I thought I'd bring it up just because I'm having some weird feelings about it there. What else did you have for the format?
I think part of it is that the color combinations are all pretty wide open. Like,
okay.
I mean, knowing what the main theme of each color combination is good, but you don't have to be there, right? Like black-red, I think the main theme is vampires with Madness as like a sub-theme. Mm-hmm. But one of the decks I actually wanted to talk about today that I wrote about in our show notes is specifically like the red-black non-aggressive deck.
Okay.
And I think that knowing the like the lesser drafted themes of each color is pretty important, or each color pair is pretty important. Like green-white, I think, is pretty obvious, where green-white humans is the deck you're going to draft the most if you're straight green-white. But the Delirium deck that I really like is kind of like a sub-theme of that deck, or of that color pair. And knowing kind of like what each main and sub theme is for each color pair is pretty important. And then you have, and I think just about all the color pairs are good, except I really don't like blue-black. I think blue-black fails to really do anything better than other color pairs, so there's just no reason to draft it. And it doesn't really combine all that well. All the cards are kind of scattered all over. Mm-hmm. Whereas all the other color pairs just about have at least plausible color combinations.
Okay. Do you want to go into that archetype here? Or?
Yeah, let's talk about red-black. Okay. So the normal red-black deck is a deck that kind of tries to curve out, has vampires. There's a lot of different aggressive vampires, and a lot of them have madness. So you end up like with a decent madness sub-theme, but it doesn't always have to have it. Sometimes some vampire decks just have all vampires and removal, and that's fine. You maybe with like Stench of Masquerade or what have you. The deck that I like drafting kind of as a fail case to vampires is a red-black madness control deck. And the reason I say it as a fail case doesn't mean this deck is bad. It's that the way to get to this deck is if red and black are open, but you just don't see the cards to draft an aggressive deck. Okay. Because aggressive,
like mainly the cheap creatures and such? Or?
Right. Aggressive decks, if they lack a good curve, tend not to do all that well.
Right.
But this deck can collect all the black-red cards and take advantage of some of the other themes that are going on. So the key cards are definitely the removal spells. These are as with most color combinations, they're your first picks. These are like Lightning Axe, Fiery Temper, Sinister Concoction, Deadweight, Murderous Compulsion. These are like your headliners. Mm-hmm. And you notice that Fiery Temper and Murderous Compulsion have madness, and Lightning Axe and Sinister Concoction enable madness. Mm-hmm. So you've already got to start there. You also have like some tier 2 removal like Throttle and Reduce to Ashes. Nothing I really prioritize all that heavily. And then you have like Madness outlets. Mad Prophet and Call to Bloodline are both very good uncommon madness outlets. And yes, Call to Bloodline is great in a vampire deck, but sometimes you'll take Call to Bloodline early, not really get a ton of other vampires or vampire synergies, but still end up with a bunch of madness cards, and you can build this control deck with it where you're just getting value out of Call to Bloodline over turns and turns.
I did that today.
Yeah. Mad Prophet also good in this deck. And then for common, you have like Tormenting Voice and Macabre Waltz. Both of those are pretty solid ways to gain advantage, especially since both of those cards are draw 2, discard 1, in whatever order, mm-hmm. whether you discard first or not. But if you discard a madness card, you break that, and all of a sudden you're just casting draw 2s. So you do get up cards if you're madnessing here. And then you have some uncommons like Ravenous Bloodseeker, which is very good, and Ghoulsteed, which I found to be a surprisingly good win condition in decks like this, especially when you can Tormenting Voice it into the graveyard sometimes.
Get it back for value later.
Or later, discard madness cards when you're getting back your Ghoulsteed. And then Pale Rider of Trust is an interesting uncommon, which I don't always play because you need cheap madness cards. If you're not aggressive and you don't have cheap madness cards, this card's very bad.
Yeah, discarding a card's a pretty steep...
Yeah, it's kind of the same with Insolent Neonate. If you're not aggressive, you need a decent amount of madness cards before you really want the card in your deck.
Right.
And then besides the madness removal cards, which again are just great, some of your really big cards here, like Twins of Mara State, are super important. This is the 3/5 common that really brickwalls a lot of offenses and gets you a free card if you can madness it at instant speed. With like Blood Mad Vampire being a card you'll play for value madnessing, but is not always the best. Though it's a fine card, and if you can clear the way with removal, it's good. And then for uncommons, you've got Malevolent Whispers, the Threaten, if you've got instant speed madness cards, and then Incorrigible Use. So all this is sounding like pretty vampiric, but again, this is assuming you don't have enough cheap cards to really run a vampire deck, and you're focused on mostly having high impact cards. So like the creature base here is, looking at stuff like, Gotstaff Arsonist, the 5-drop werewolf,
sure.
Rancid Rat, Morcrit, Necropod. These are all cards that seem like they don't fit in this deck or in the normal red-black decks all that well. But here you've got cards like Rancid Rats, which trade up nicely, and then cards like Necropod or Arsonist, which can finish the game by themselves. The whole point is to have these finishers that don't need a lot of support and don't care that your opponent starts at 20 life. They're going to be at 20 life on turn 5 or 6 a lot of the time, but you're getting 2-for-1s and killing their stuff on the way there.
Right.
And then one little note is Sanitarium Skeleton. Again, if you have Call to Bloodline or a couple other discard cards, it can become a legit card.
You can actually make the cut. Yeah, for sure.
So this isn't like a wildly different archetype than what you'd expect. But the reason I wanted to highlight it is because it's the backup deck. It's the deck that you can go to because if you try to draft black-red vampires, but you just don't see any like Olivia's Bloodsworn or Ravenous Bloodseekers or any other of the cheap vampires, and you just don't have 2-drops, like your beatdown deck is just not going to work.
Right. but this is a nice fallback. So this is like just a different take, like a different way to go from an archetype that we kind of already know about, right? The vampires one.
Right. And
do you think there's a lot of these in this format?
Not all colors have them, and the color combinations that have multiple decks are I think the better ones. I mean, that's why I think green-white is overall like one of the best color combinations, or green-black, right. Because it's just so easy to like go into those different decks, whether it's green-white beatdown or a delirium deck. And the reason I think green is overall the best color is it's got not only great commons overall, like Rabid Bite, and then Vessel, which helps you fix your mana, Byway Courier, which is a great card. Because of Vessel and Fork in the Road, you can play 3 colors, so you have your pick of more cards to choose from.
Now, what about the some of the archetypes that we've talked about here? We talked about the Werewolves deck, which I think is the most clear-cut on rails archetype in the format. But like we also touched on a few others, like green-white humans. But what are the payoffs, right? Like, is there really a green-white humans deck? Because I haven't seen it. I've seen green-white solid creatures, and then there's a few rares or something that care about humans, or maybe an uncommon here or there, right? But like Veteran Cathar to me isn't like, I mean, it's a nice payoff, but it's not like a build around card. It's not like a card that says, you know, I'm all humans or whatever. The card's just fine on its own, and it certainly helps you out. You know, Thalia's Lieutenant's a good one, right? That you can put in a deck, and it does reward you for having humans. But like draft in and draft out, when I play against people playing green-white, I'm not really seeing the human side of that strategy come out. It's just like the solid creatures or the, you know, the reasonable curve or whatever. Vampires is somewhere in the middle, I would say. You know, there are a few cards that care about vampires, but for the most part, it's what you described in that sort of primary build of the black-red deck, which is that there's a few cards that care. Once again, you know, there's the Aristocrat, and, you know, there's the rare 1-drop that gives all your vampires madness or whatever. But, you know, there aren't a ton of payoffs for these type of cards, at least none that are as clear-cut as the ones for the werewolves. So where does that leave us? Like, are these still actual decks that we should be going for here? Or is it like, because it feels like it loosens the constraint a lot on, you know, how dialed in an archetype is when you don't have those clear-cut payoffs.
I mean, that's a kind of open-ended question. I do want to say that green-white humans is definitely a deck.
Okay, so what are the payoffs? Why do I care that a card says human in the text box?
True Faith Censor is a big one. Okay. Intrepid Provisioner is a big one. Those are both commons, and they both give you legit advantage. The other is that a lot of the humans just skew aggressive. So, yeah,
that part I've noticed.
So if you just draft a bunch of aggressive creatures, a lot of them are humans, and so you just call it green-white humans. It's not like you won't play a non-human. Yeah,
you're going to play a Quilled Wolf in there or whatever.
Yeah,
sure.
For sure. Yeah. But it's mostly the True Faith Censor and the Provisioner that do it. Plus, like a rare like Thalia's Lieutenant, of course, does have some amount of impact.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. For me, like, it's harder for because when I look at a card like Howlpack Resurgence or whatever the All My Wolves Punch Your Guy card is, like those are absurd payoffs.
Moonlight Hunt,
Moonlight Hunt. You know what I mean? Like those are the ones that I'm like, damn, like. Wow, that makes me really want to make sure as many werewolves as I can. When I look at Intrepid Provisioner, I'm like, that's solid. Like, if that pumps something every time I cast it, that's a good card, right? I mean, I'm not unhappy to run that card in any way, but it doesn't have that same oomph that some of the other payoff cards.
It's not quite as in your face, but it's still there.
Yeah, but it's still there. Yeah. Okay. I just find that really interesting to find like where on the scale all these things sit. You know, when I think of Delirium, I go through that same thing of like, well, what are my big payoffs in a given 2-color Delirium pack or archetype? And it ranges, right? Like some of them are quite strong. Some of them aren't. If I get a Toppelgeist online, like that's pretty darn good. You know, like I'm pretty happy with that. If I get a Moldgraph Scavenger online, that's pretty good. Like those cards are good.
What's interesting is both for Delirium and Clues, the payoffs tend to be uncommon, but there are so many of them that it actually works. Okay. Because, you know, we generally say, like, don't draft a deck around uncommons, like, if you haven't seen them yet, but Delirium just has a lot of them. So you can kind of get there on that.
Okay. Why don't we actually just take there's a few cards I wanted to bring up. I kind of put a big list in. I don't necessarily need to talk about all of them, but there's a few cards that, you know, I think that this is one of the most interesting sets that we've ever had on the podcast for set reviews, just because I think we went in knowingly saying, well, this is just prone to change more than normal. And I think a lot of these have changed a little more than normal. And there's a few cards I wanted to pick your brain about on kind of movers and shakers and cards I'm still figuring out. If you're down for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think part of it is that one of the most interesting parts of our show 2 weeks ago was when we got in a knockdown, drag-out fight where we both got very angry about...
we cooled down just in time to do the show the next week.
Yeah. about Erdwall Illuminator and Jace. But in general, we both just tried to pick up a list of cards which we thought were interesting to talk about, whether they're overrated or underrated or just interesting.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I've got a few. You got a few too. Why don't you start us off here?
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with Jace's Scrutiny because there's, again, that's a highly debated card. Mostly, I've already kind of said these things, but mostly I just want to point out that it's just, you don't have to do much work and it can often get you a 2-for-1. It's only 2 mana at up front and you can crack the clue later. The clue is a card. You have to break it. It costs mana, but it is eventually a card. And 2 mana for a 2-for-1 is a good deal.
Totally. So, I think that's the way to look at it. It's not that it's a bomb or super overpowered, right? It's that the floor is quite low and the ceiling is very high. And the floor is quite high and the ceiling is very high, right? I mean, that's a great combo. Like, if you get a 2-for-1 off this thing, it's just stupid. It's just a dumb card. It's just super cheap blue card that you just use to get a 2-for-1. That's amazing. And if you don't, for example, today, my opponent played, a turn 2 werewolf and I just fired it off on my turn to make sure that werewolf didn't flip and I got the card back later. And I'm like, that's not the end of the world. It's not a particularly efficient way to draw a card, but you know what? You do what you got to do and you reserve the right to sometimes completely blow out your opponent. And that's a nice combo. I'm definitely a fan of Scrutiny as well, especially in defensive decks. Yeah,
and like you said, the fact that you can just fire it off early, it's just such a low opportunity cost.
Yes.
So that's why I like this card, and I think it's still kind of underrated. Another card we kind of touched on barely earlier was Morcrit Necropod.
Yeah, what do you think about that guy?
So
he's huge.
It looks like a Dire Swine or a Silberland Snapper, the 6/6 blue card that's common. Mm-hmm. It's much, much better than either of those cards, and I think it's pretty important to know that there's a difference. And we talked about heuristics slightly last week. One is that, and one thing we mentioned was cards that look like other cards that are medium.
Yeah.
You tend to underrate, and I think Necropod's suffering from that a little. It looks like these two, 10th pick commons. Morcrit Necropod's a bit better than that. The fact that it's a 7/7 instead of 6/6 is relevant. The fact that it has Menace means it can't get chump blocked, and the drawback of sacking things just isn't that big on turn 7 or 8.
Yeah. No, I found that card to be quite good. It's very, very scary when you're facing it down if you're trying to block, for sure.
Another one is the triumvirate of Reduced to Ashes, Throttle, and Sleep Paralysis.
Mediocre removal central.
Again, these cards are all playable.
Yes.
You should play them in decks that are light on removal. I'm not going to berate you for taking one of them, but they're worse than other comparable removal spells have been in other formats. They're just not as good as the Stitched Manglers and cheap combat tricks and even, dare I say, Jace's Scrutinies of the world. They just aren't.
Yep. No, that's been my experience too. I have them all firmly in the Necessary Evil camp.
And the other one is the other thing that I put on this list that I want to talk about is not. It's not a single card. It's our 2-drop discussion. I want to expand on the.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I think some people maybe oversimplified what you had said about it. So,
I want to reiterate: we're not saying 2-drops are bad and you shouldn't put them in your deck, and we're not saying that the good 2-drops are worse than you think. We're saying that you don't intrinsically need 2-drops, whereas some formats you do.
And that's the key. That's really the key, is that there are formats where you simply cannot submit your deck and feel good about it unless it has some number of 2-drops, often in the 3 to 5 range. And this isn't one of those formats. That's the note here. That's the key.
Yeah, and you basically don't default to 2 mana 2/2 and 2 mana 2/1. These have to go in my deck and I have to 5th pick them, 4th pick them. I did 4th pick or 3rd pick? No, 4th pick a Gold Caller's Apprentice. I wasn't very happy about it though.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's 2 2/2s.
Yeah, that is, and basically what we're saying is yes, Coiled Wolf, Hinterland Logger, the cards that are relevant in the late game. These are all just good cards. We're not saying don't play those cards. We're saying the straight 2 mana 2/2s and 2 mana 2/1s that don't have particular relevance in the late game. These are just not exciting, and this isn't a format where if you miss your 2-drop, you're dead. I mean, it's a format where sometimes if you miss your two drop, you're in trouble, but it's not so much that I'm just, so paranoid that I'm third picking these cards out of normal packs.
Right. I had a couple that I wanted to ask you about.
Go for it.
All the combat tricks in the set.
Are you into them? Do you like them? It's you can admit it. I know you don't like combat tricks.
I'm medium on them.
All right.
I'm still not high on them. We had an interesting thing happen at GP Barcelona, which was the GP that preceded the Pro Tour. So this is really, the first limited, high-level limited event. And we saw Fabrizio and Terry, prioritize combat tricks and really try to maximize on those and have a lot of success doing it. He crushed, in fact, with those cards. And the question going into the PT was, is that the real deal? Or is that something that we're, kind of a one-off? And they ended up, in my mind, moving up significantly on my watch list. Maybe not quite as high as Fabrizio had them, but still, these cards are real. Like, you have to be aware and really pay attention to these combat tricks. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of them are a lot higher than I'd normally have them. I normally view them as roughly interchangeable and roughly replaceable by, whatever. And here, I think that it's partly a reaction to what you just covered with the removal spells. I just think that people are saying, I don't want to play Sleep Paralysis. I don't want to play Reduce to Ashes if I can help it. I want to punish people who play those. And these cheap combat tricks let you just be faster than your opponent. Also, there's a decent number of relatively low power and relatively high toughness blockers, and these combat tricks are quite handy to get through those for a really cheap price. I also think, by the way, that this is part of the reason why Jace's Scrutiny is better, is because you can blank a combat trick with it pretty easily, and if people are going to be more aggressively playing and casting their combat tricks, then Jace's Scrutiny goes up that much further. So that's been a funny one, the combat trick thing. I do think that they're better in this format than they have been, and I think it's partly due to the fact that the removal is so much worse.
So we had a really interesting discussion about combat tricks in Limited while at the Pro Tour, and Ben Stark had an interesting theory that like the rate on these combat tricks was so good, like 1 mana +2/+2, maybe you get a 1/1 in Strength of Arms, 2 mana +2/+2 untap and reach and aim high. That it showed that like that was part of like the rate was so good that it demonstrated like why the removal was bad and why the combat trick was good. It was just intentionally that they were pushed. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of get some glimpse on it. I'm actually going to throw a link into the show notes here of Paul Cheon's video blog where
the
Chlog even where he filmed some amount of our team limited discussion. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I would check it out. And I'm still holding out hope that we can get Ben on the show here.
Oh, we'll get Ben on the show. He said he wants to come on.
Yeah, I'm going to see if we can revive that combat trick discussion, perhaps. But I agree. Circling back, I too am not a fan of combat tricks in general, and in this format, I tend to play them. They're just good.
I mean,
Confront the Unknown and Survive the Night they're 2-for-1s.
Yep.
They're 2-for-1s, and Confront the Unknown is a great raid in a clue deck. 1 mana +2/+2 or +3/+3 draw card. Like that's absurd.
Yes.
Like all of these combat tricks are so much better than normal and they're so cheap, like and efficient that combat tricks are where it's at, removal's not where it's at, and that's just a flip-flop from most formats, and especially how we tend to like to draft.
Yeah, and I mean, I would even amend that to say that combat tricks are where it's at because removal is not where it's at, right? I mean, the reason that we traditionally didn't like combat tricks as much is because you open yourself up for 2-for-1s for any instant speed removal. Well, now all that removal's at uncommon or better, and the other removal costs 5 mana or is a sorcery, or is a 5-mana sorcery. And you're just not getting punished as often as you used to. So I find that really interesting. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. How am I supposed to know where Ongoing Investigation, Trail of Evidence, Crawling Sensation, Ulvenwald Mysteries, and any number of these blue, black, or blue and green specifically things go?
First of all, don't put Ongoing Investigation in the rest of the pile with these riffs.
Why? Why can't I do that?
Ongoing Investigation is great.
It's fine, right?
Yeah,
now,
it is great. It's
So here's a question: do you have to have access to green mana to make it great?
To make it truly great, yes.
Okay. So, because I have played it in blue decks and had it be good, and I think it held its own.
Them.
Yeah,
but if you have access to green mana and have a lot of creatures in your deck, you're drawing cards and gaining life.
Yeah, it's just
and that draws you more creatures, which draw you more cards and gain you more life.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a big fan of the card. I put it in as the grouping that we kind of had originally, and I do agree that it's in a different category. But I thought I'd push you a little on it. But what about Trail of Evidence? What about Crawling Sensation? What about Ulvenwald Mysteries? I still just, like, I play these in decks that seems like they might be good, but I still don't feel like I have a solid grasp on this is the deck that wants this card and this is the deck that doesn't. It's like, how the hell do I know if I want an Ulvenwald Mysteries in my deck?
Ulvenwald Mysteries basically wants a lot of creatures that want to trade off. And other than that, I mean, it's a kind of slow, grindy card advantage engine. It's kind of hard to get exactly the right deck that has enough creatures but also can enable the mysteries because it helps with other. It's good with other clue cards too. Basically, if you have Thraben Inspectors and Byway Couriers in your deck, then the card is great.
Okay, so basically expendable creatures is what you want.
Right. Trail of Evidence. I think if you assume the card is not playable, you're probably right. Okay. It's very, very, very niche. Basically, if you have a deck with tons of spells and you don't have any of the good spell finishers like Rise from the Tides, Pirewolf, that sort of thing, maybe you can play Trail of Evidence, but I still think it's pretty bad. So I do not like that card. Crawling Sensation I like in the deck with like Epitaph Golem and Groundskeeper and Vessels, Green Vessels, Seasons Past maybe, but that's again a little bit more niche. So if I had to rate these, I would say Ongoing Investigation is a card that I'm happy to first pick, legit happy to first pick. Okay. And I will almost always play, even if I have to splash a little bit of green for it.
Okay.
Or splash it in like a white-green deck, for example. Ulvenwald Mysteries is a card that doesn't take a ton of work. You just want a bunch of creatures in your deck, and then it's a really solid late-game engine, but it's not really a beatdown card, so it's more of a mid-ranger control card. Crawling Sensation is a kind of niche build-around, and Trail of Evidence is very bad.
Okay.
So
yeah, I have a hard time figuring out where I'm supposed to take
you also forgot Fleeting Memories. There's another one.
Oh yeah, the mill one. Right. I did forget that.
Two in a blue investigates, and then whenever you crack a clue, mill them for 3. Another very niche card, which goes along with like something like Manic Scribe, which I see you put on the list as well. And you end up in a mill deck sometimes as a finisher, as like in your like all clue deck. If you have a bunch of Graph Moles, you're never gonna die. It's a way to kill your opponent, but again, not a very good card. It's funny. There are what do we have? 5 different enchantments that either have to do with clues or like milling yourself and getting insects or some combination of all those things. And I think there's one very good card, a couple niche build-arounds, and a couple like kind of bad cards in them.
Yeah. Yeah,
trust me. I've played the cards, just so the listeners don't have to.
Yeah, and I keep trying them out and just never really feeling confident. Again, outside of Ongoing Investigation, never really quite feeling confident about exactly where it's supposed to be. Indulgent Aristocrat. I like it.
Mentioning that because you are the Indulgent
No, I like the card. I think it's quite strong.
So this is the 1/1 lifelink vampire for 1 black that you sack 2 and sack a creature to put a +1 count on all your vampires.
Yeah.
Have you played this card in decks without Call to Bloodline?
No.
Yeah, that's the thing. I
think it might only be that. Yeah.
The card is sweet, but I don't think I've ever played it in a deck without Call to Bloodline either.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you have an all vampires deck, I could see it.
I would play it in an all vampires deck for sure. I mean, if I have maybe 2 other vampires, and I'm good to go. But yeah, I might. I did have an early experience with Indulgent Aristocrat and Call the Bloodline. I was on the bad side of it, but still, it opened my eyes to that combo, and maybe I've overrated it since. I don't take it that highly unless I do have a Call the Bloodline, and then I'll take it, as early as I can. What about Hinterland Logger? This is one that has gone up actually quite a bit for me. Now I just like the card, where before, I'll admit, I didn't really like it that much. I thought, well, as a 2/1 for 2, it's kind of weak. Like, it'll trade for basically everything. And then as a 4/2 trample, it also is kind of weak because it kind of trades for everything there too, even if it gets in some incidental damage. What I wasn't factoring in was the popularity and potency of the combat tricks, which now all of a sudden a 4/2 trample is quite a nice target for a lot of the combat tricks, and let it not trade for those lesser 2-drops and 3-drops and such.
It is a little unfortunate that if you manage to flip it and then you attack and use a combat trick, you're probably going to play another creature that turn because the combat tricks are cheap, so it's going to flip back.
Yeah, you're just too efficient. Yeah.
The reason I had a Hinterland Logger on the list of good 2-drops earlier was that it's a 2-drop that in the late game sometimes is a 4/2. That's just a good card. So Hinterland Logger is great.
Yeah. Also,
it's all human and a werewolf for 2 different decks.
Yes. Oh yeah, it is good. I have one more thing to discuss, and then we can call it a show here, unless you have any others. The werewolf thing.
The werewolf thing?
Yeah. So this is I think a fundamental design issue with the way that werewolves are designed, and I think it's one that they've just that R&D's just decided to live with. But it is still prevalent, I think, which is the punishing nature of them, right? And I think that Hinterland Logger is one of the all-stars of this, which is when your opponent stumbles, right? When they have to take a mulligan to 5 or 6, or when they don't have a play. You're on the play and they don't have something in the first couple of turns in the game, or they miss a color for a couple of turns, and a Hinterland Logger does 8 or 12 damage to them, in those early stages. I do still find that part as a downside of the format. The fact that these cards exist can compound a feel bad moment for a player who's already having a tough game where they've mulliganed or stumbled or their mana didn't come together. And that part I do still find kind of annoying. And I think Hinterland Logger is one of the all-stars for making that happen. On par, I think it's a pretty fair card. I don't think there's any real issue with it, but I did want to bring that up. I've seen that happen both to me.
It's not even just when you mold a 5. It just increases the number of non-games.
Yeah, there you go. That's a better way to look at it.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, they're more likely to happen when someone molds because they're more likely to miss their turn.
Yeah, I mean, I just meant like case study wise, but you're totally right. If you just looked at the aggregate,
the aggregate is just like when a werewolf comes out on turn 2, especially on the play, the number of times the game is just over when they flip is just higher than if that's not how the mechanic worked.
Right.
And that's not like, oh, werewolves are terrible, I hate them. It's more like there are fewer fun games because of 2-drop werewolves flipping, and that's part of the reason I don't think you see very many common 2-drop werewolves.
Yeah, I mean, there's only that one, right?
Yeah, there's just that one.
Yeah, the Forge Master is uncommon, and the Lambholt Pacifist is uncommon. So.
And the Duskwatch Recruiter is uncommon also.
And the Big Dusky.
Speaking of cards that end the game when they flip, if you flip into a Duskwatch Recruiter into a Howling Horde Howler on turn 2,
I know.
You're getting hit for 3 and they're playing a 4-drop, and then the game is over.
Yeah, then the game's very, very, very over. Yeah. All right, well, that's going to do it, though, unless you had anything else for Shadows. I'm going to continue to plug away. I will, one last note. I've still been drafting that blue-white deck. It's still awesome. I still think it's one of the best decks in the format.
I don't think it's awesome, though. I wouldn't call it one of the best decks in the format.
I think it's either the first or second best deck in the format. I mean it. I'm not kidding. Like I still can't figure out how people haven't caught on and started drafting this thing more.
Look, I'm not saying I have like cracked the format either, but I think that if I like in my stack order of decks, like in terms of how often they come together and how good they are when they come together, I think it's probably worse than like the combination of like white green or green black and like whether it's humans or delirium, like those couple decks.
I like white green right up there with it. I don't like black green better than it.
Yeah, I like white green a lot more than black green. I guess I guess white blue is probably like close to a lot of other decks. It's just I don't know. I would hesitate to call it the best deck in the format.
Yeah, I mean maybe it's not like I think white green's probably better.
The problem is that
I have it near the top.
What's white blue's fail case? If you don't get the right curve for to have it or enough flyers.
I mean, I transitioned into a more controlling build, where I played like Nephalia Moondrakes, these kind of like clunky, finishers, in the air and have made that work somewhat. The truth is that the hardest part to find are those creatures in the early part because the rest of the deck is basically based on commons and basically interchangeable. Which I think is a big strength of a deck and part of the reason why I think it is one of the better decks to try to draft in the format, just because you do fail less often in a deck that is primarily based on commons and doesn't really care which pieces you have in each spot. There's obviously better and worse ones, but there's so many that you usually can fill them out. I mean, you're playing Devilthorn Foxes and the Cathar's Companions and stuff. These are not cards that are hotly contested. I mean, would you rather have, a Dauntless Cathar? Hell yes. But sometimes you don't get those, so you play the companion instead. And that you can play the furtive homunculus and these type of just junkers. And they just doesn't matter because you have so many tempo cards that, I use the T word, that just get, whatever they've played out of the way in combination with your flyers that you can get the job done. Anyway, I did want to bring up though that I'm still drafting that deck and still have found it to be quite strong.
Reasonable. I drafted Delirium on stream a bunch of times and lost round 1 every single time. So there is that.
That graveyard's empty. All right. Well, let's call it a show, Luis. That was a fun one. You can find us on social media if you want to say hi or ask us any questions or yell at us or whatever. I am Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can email us, lr@lrcast.com. You can find everything related to the podcast on lrcast.com. Right on the front page, you can find links to our stream, to the Facebook group. You can find links to the subreddit, I should say, to our streams, if I didn't say that already, to the Limited Resources YouTube channel. What's a bunch of cool content on there. It's all there on lrcast.com. I also want to remind you that this podcast is brought to you every week by channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out for all of your Magic needs and awesome free content. That's right. Videos, podcasts like this one. You can find articles with sideboarding guides, with pick orders, all that kind of stuff. And there's new stuff every day over on channelfireball.com. That is going to do it for the show this week. I think we're going to be able, Luis, to get together and record the next one live and in the same room like we did when we were in Spain. So hopefully we can make that work as we're both doing coverage at the Magic Online Championship this weekend.
Yeah, I had a couple of people let me know that they really liked the episode we did at the Pro Tour. And part of that, I have to imagine, is that we're in the same room.
Yeah.
We get to talk with, seeing the other person and to have more of a conversational tone than to see the robots over Skype. So
yeah, I've always been proud of how our chemistry works on Skype, but there is no substituting just being in the same room as the other person. So hopefully we can make that work.
Yeah, and we at this rate, there's a lot of events, so we might try to line up recordings so that we get more shows in person. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, GPLA. Interesting. All right, well, that will do it for the show this week. Thank you so much for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Marshall, can you define tempo for me?
I have a definition of tempo.
All right.
So here's the thing.
No, this is my big speech. The sign off.
Yeah. So the deal is that I think that you can take the theory of tempo and that kind of thing to a really deep, crazy level. But I think that at some point on that journey, you lose the applicability of it. You have to choose terms when we're talking about Magic that actually mean something. And once you try to encompass too much, they lose their meaning. So the term that when I use tempo, I use it primarily to describe something that happens in a game of Magic that gives you temporary advantage, right?
Temporary advantage.
Yes, temporary advantage. And sometimes that comes at the cost of long-term advantage. So it's getting you ahead in the short term. The classic tempo play would be a bounce spell. It gets a creature out of the way for now, and you lose a card, but you get to attack or do whatever you want to do. It doesn't deal with the card permanently, but it deals with it for a short period of time to give you that gain. And, taking it one step further, usually the type of deck or the type of strategy you employ is trying to capitalize on that gain in the biggest way possible. So when I say tempo play, that's what I mean. I mean a card that gives you that short-term gain potentially for a long-term loss.
So the reason this came up is we were talking about this at lunch a couple days ago, myself, Matt Nass, and our coworker Ashwin, and I brought up the fact that no one has ever defined tempo in any meaningful form, which is kind of an exaggeration. So what I did, as in my quest to increase the total amount of magic knowledge in the world, is I
you increase something.
is I asked Twitter to define tempo, and I have
how many replies did you get on that?
Oh, many hundreds. Yes. I've collected some of my favorite answers, 2 of which come from former co-hosts, by the way.
Oh, good.
So now that I have you answer, a little bit long-winded, but you had the advantage.
But my real answer, though, was quite short.
Yeah, and you weren't restricted to 140 characters.
That's true.
So let's read down some of my favorite answers. Patrick Sullivan at Basic Mountain on Twitter defines it as trying to kill your opponent before they can leverage all your resources. But that is imprecise, obviously. And I think that is a good definition.
That's a very solid 140
a solid through line of all these definitions has to do with time. Certainly there's a time element here. Brian Wong says the pace at which you're able to deploy threats and neutralize opposing threats.
Okay.
Brian Brown-Dewin says, trading resources at a cheaper rate than your opponent does in order to generate a temporary advantage. That's closer to what you had. Mm-hmm. Pat Cox said, is this tweet an example of you tempoing Twitter? And that sums it up very nicely.
That's fantastic.
I use very little of my time in total characters, and I got a lot of people to spend a lot of time defining.
Oh, Pat Cox is amazing.
John Locke is a very Lockean answer. 1, there's card access, and then there's card deployment. 2, advantage, in quotes, is the former, and tempo, in quotes, is the latter. 3, question mark, question mark, question mark. 4, profit.
Profit, all right. I don't think anybody learned anything from that.
Paulo Vitor cheated. He said, it's the rhythm of the game, and here's a link to my article, which explains it very thoroughly. We'll throw that link in the show notes as well.
All right. That is cheating, by the way. You're right.
Yes. And then I defined it as vapor snag is tempo. I as usual.
That was you?
The low-hanging fruit, yeah. And to close this discussion, which honestly, jokes aside, I was talking about tempo all day on the stream yesterday. Jokes aside, I do think it's interesting because everyone says tempo. No one really has a precise definition, but everyone kind of knows what you mean when you say it.
Yeah.
Like, people understand. Vapor snag is tempo. Mana leak or remand tend to be tempo. Being ahead on mana and time in the game is some way tempo. In chess, it's initiative, right? Tom Martell and Alex Hayne were talking a lot about how to port chess definitions because they play a lot of chess over. It's not quite the same because there's a lot more metrics magic than in chess. Mm-hmm. Chess is mostly just turns. But yeah, tempo is good. And I think Thomas Rochholm, actually, who's, if you're a longtime player, might notice him. Anyway, he hasn't played in a long time, but he had a very good closer to this, which is the interesting part is the fact that people's understanding of it probably differs much less than their suggested definitions.
That is interesting.
He's saying everyone basically
we're all on the same page.
Everyone basically gets it, but no one defines it the same way or well.
Yeah.
So I think that all of this together was kind of interesting. I just want to poke the bear a little bit. Obviously, there's some amount of that too. I did want to tempo Twitter a little bit, and I succeeded beyond my wildest expectations.
I'd love to see what the number of characters you wrote out versus characters people wrote out on this.
Massive advantage there. Right. That's just tempo at its finest.
Right.
But it really was. This is a fundamental game term that a lot of people use, whether they know it or not. Like both. They use the concept whether they know the word tempo or not, and they use the word tempo without really knowing exactly what it means, but still understanding what it's trying to get at. So I think there's a lot here. There's a lot that's interesting here, and I like talking about it. But there's less actionable stuff than you might think. So that is why it is relegated to let's just say the closing part of the show.